Meanwhile, Australia is looking at Singapore as the next potential partner for quarantine-free travel bubble. These on the heels of a similar arrangement with New Zealand. Well, that bubble opened on Monday, which saw families reuniting after being separated for more than a year.
Now, the Straits Times reported last month that Australia is exploring ways to reboot its international education sector, including allowing vaccinated students from Singapore to re-enter or creating special student-only flights and quarantine facilities.
Let's hear more from our Australia correspondent, Jonathan Perlman. Hi, Jonathan. Jonathan, what is Australia's stance on having a similar travel bubble arrangement with Singapore? Now, we understand Prime Minister Scott Morrison has flagged Singapore as a potential next destination.
That's right. Australia is very keen to look to Singapore as the next potential bubble that Australia could have. Obviously, the New Zealand-Australia bubble has started this week, and there's a lot of excitement about that. And I think the thinking is that this could give confidence to Australia, really, to open up further bubbles. Australia's had such heavy travel restrictions, and so it will now look to other countries. And Singapore has been flagged as really the first potential destination after Australia. Michael McCormack, the Deputy Prime Minister, said that this week, that discussions apparently are underway between Australia and Singapore, according to the Deputy Prime Minister. And really the hope is that that Singapore would be the next step for Australia, and then potentially maybe also some Pacific countries.
Right. Well, before we get ahead of ourselves and start making travel plans or anything, Jonathan, what is the current COVID-19 situation in Australia?
So within Australia itself, things seem very normal. There are no real COVID restrictions in most of the country, or very limited restrictions. But life here is pretty much as normal because there's no community cases right now. There are cases within quarantine facilities, and basically there have been some occasional clusters that have emerged from quarantine facilities. But aside from that, within Australia, things are relatively normal, but there are very strict travel restrictions. Some states have different travel restrictions. Western Australia has been very reluctant to open its borders and to enter the New Zealand bubble. So things still vary state by state, and potentially, if and when there's some sort of bubble between Australia and Singapore, one thing that people will need to keep a lookout for is, do the states have different health requirements and different travel requirements? But beyond international travel, Australia's fairly free of COVID and has fairly light restrictions across the country.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you so much for sharing the latest, Jonathan. That was the Straits Times' Australia correspondent, Jonathan Perlman. You can look out for his story on straitstimes.com.